Welcome to Charlie's Tales, an adult paranormal werewolf romance. The soul knows its counterpart, even when the mind is blind. The heart breaks for the love it denies, but the wolf only bows to the truth it cannot change. An ancient pack proverb says, Prologue, the weight of the crown. The moon hung blood-red over the Silver Crest territory, as if the heavens themselves mourned the passing of Queen Felicia. Alpha King Charles Blackthorne stood at the window of his private chambers, his massive frame silhouetted against the dying light. His reflection showed a man who had aged a decade in a single day, jaw clenched, golden eyes hollow with grief, the weight of an entire kingdom now pressing down on shoulders that had never felt so inadequate. His mother was gone, the woman who had ruled with iron wisdom and compassionate strength, who had kept the council in check and the bloodlines pure, who had been his only true compass in a world of political vipers and power-hungry sycophants. She was gone, and they had descended on him before her body was even cold. The bloodline must be secured, Your Majesty. The arrangement with the Moonstone pack stands. Eva has been prepared since birth. You must take your Luna within the moon cycle, or the council will be forced to intervene. Charles's hands curled into fists against the stone windowsill, his claws extending involuntarily as his wolf surged beneath his skin. The beast was raw, grieving, furious at being caged in this prison of duty and expectation. He wanted to run, to shift and tear through the forest until his paws bled and his lungs burned, to howl his rage at the stars until his voice gave out. Instead, he stood here, trapped. The soft whisper of silk against marble broke through his spiraling thoughts. They don't deserve you. Charles didn't turn, but every cell in his body oriented toward that voice, husky, forbidden, laced with dark promise. Charlotte. She moved like liquid shadow across his chambers, her raven hair cascading over bare shoulders, her crimson dress clinging to curves that had been his undoing for the past 6 months. She was fire and chaos, everything his mother had warned him against, everything the council would never accept. And she was the only thing that made him feel alive. They parade that arranged girl in front of you like your livestock to be bred, Charlotte continued, her voice dripping with contempt. She came to stand behind him, her fingers trailing up his spine with possessive familiarity. As if the Alpha King of the Silver Crest should bow to some ancient contract made before you could even speak. Charles's jaw tightened. Eva is of noble blood. The Moonstone pack is weak, Charlotte interrupted, pressing her body against his back. Her scent enveloped him, exotic spices and night-blooming jasmine, intoxicating and wrong in ways that made his wolf both snarl and submit. You need a queen who matches your strength, Charles, not some pampered princess who's been groomed to simper and obey. He turned then, and the moment his eyes met hers, the world narrowed to just this. Her dark gaze holding promises of freedom, of choice, of a throne shared with someone who wanted him, not just his crown. Charlotte's lips curved into a knowing smile. She reached up, trailing one sharp nail along his jaw. You feel it, don't you? This cage they're building around you. Your mother's ghost whispering duty in one ear, the council's demands in the other. She rose on her toes, her breath hot against his throat. But I know what you really need. Charles's hands found her waist of their own accord, fingers digging into the silk covering her hips. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. His mother had sensed something off about Charlotte, had warned him in those final days that not all wolves wore their true nature on their sleeve. But grief was a knife in his chest, and Charlotte was the only balm that dulled the blade. "Tell me you're mine," she whispered, her lips brushing the shell of his ear. "Tell me you'll announce it tomorrow, that you'll cast aside their arranged puppet and claim me as your Luna." His wolf stirred uneasily, a low, warning growl rumbling in the back of his consciousness. But Charles shoved it down, desperate for the escape she offered. "The council will fight it," he said, his voice rough. Charlotte's smile turned predatory. "Then we fight them. Together." She cupped his face, forcing him to hold her gaze. "You're the Alpha King, Charles. You bow to no one. Certainly not to some treaty signed by dead monarchs." She kissed him then, fierce and claiming, a brand of ownership that should have raised every alarm in his warrior's instincts. Instead, he surrendered to it, to her, letting the dark tide of her presence drown out the voice of duty and the ghost of his mother's disapproval. When she pulled back, her eyes gleamed with triumph. "Reject the arranged mate. Tomorrow, in front of the entire court. Show them that you choose your own destiny." Charles's heart hammered against his ribs. Rejecting a fated arrangement was dangerous, potentially catastrophic for pack alliances. But the thought of being shackled to a stranger chosen for him, of living the rest of his immortal life as a puppet king. "Tomorrow," he agreed, his voice steel. "I'll end this charade." Charlotte's laugh was like honeyed poison. "That's my king." She pulled him toward the massive bed that dominated his chambers, and Charles went willingly, desperate to lose himself in sensation, to forget the council's demands and his mother's final, worried gaze. As Charlotte's dress pooled on the floor and her hands made quick work of his shirt, Charles tried to ignore the way his wolf whined in the back of his mind, a sound of distress, of warning, of something fundamentally wrong. But he was so tired of listening to everyone else. Just this once, he would choose for himself, even if that choice damned them all. Chapter 1. The illicit heat, 3 days later. The council chamber reeked of tension and barely restrained fury. Charles sat on the elevated throne of carved obsidian, his posture deliberately casual despite the rigid disapproval radiating from the 12 elders arranged in a semicircle before him. To his right, standing where no unmated wolf should ever stand, was Charlotte. She wore power like a second skin, her black gown cut to emphasize every dangerous curve, her dark hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her throat, her hand resting possessively on the arm of his throne. The statement was unmistakable. Elder Thorne, the council's longest-serving member, looked like he might stroke out. His weathered face had gone purple, his white beard practically vibrating with indignation. "Your Majesty," he bit out, the title sounding more like a curse. "This is beyond irregular. This is my decision," Charles interrupted, his alpha command rolling through the chamber like thunder. Several of the younger wolves in attendance actually flinched. "Charlotte is my chosen companion, and she will be treated with the respect that position demands." "She has no position." Elder Thorne slammed his staff against the marble floor. "She is not of noble blood, not of any recognized pack, and certainly not the mate you were contracted to." "Contracted?" Charles leaned forward, his eyes flashing gold. "Like I'm a prize stallion to be bred according to someone else's schedule?" "Like you're a king with responsibilities," Elder Thorne shot back. The old wolf had known Charles since birth. He was one of the few who dared speak plainly. "Your mother understood the importance of bloodlines, of alliances. Queen Felicia herself arranged." "My mother is dead." Charles's voice went cold and sharp. and I will not be bound by arrangements made for a child who no longer exists." The silence that followed was suffocating. Charlotte's hand slid up to rest on Charles's shoulder, her thumb tracing small circles against his neck in a gesture that was both intimate and territorial. Charles felt his wolf respond immediately, not with the warm contentment of true affection, but with that dark, addictive heat that Charlotte seemed to generate like a furnace. Elder Whitmore, a silver-haired woman with keen eyes, spoke next. Her voice was measured, careful. "Your Majesty, we understand that grief can cloud judgment, but you must consider what this means for our alliance with the Moonstone Pack. Eva has been prepared her entire life." "Then she'll adapt," Charles said flatly. "I'm sure the Moonstone Pack can find another use for a trained political pawn." He felt Charlotte's approving squeeze on his shoulder, saw the slight smirk playing at her lips. It sent a thrill through him, the pleasure of her approval, of choosing rebellion over submission. "You speak of Eva as if she's merely a tool," Elder Whitmore continued, her gaze sharp. "But she is the daughter of Alpha Marcus, groomed by Queen Felicia herself as a companion worthy of your crown. To reject her without even meeting her formally is not just disrespectful. It's dangerous." Dangerous? Charlotte's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Every head swiveled toward her, shock rippling through the assembly. Unmated females did not speak in council. Ever. But Charlotte seemed utterly unconcerned with protocol. She stepped forward, her hand still maintaining contact with Charles, as if drawing strength, or something else, from the connection. "What's dangerous," she continued, her voice sultry and sharp, "is trying to force an Alpha King into a loveless bond. What's dangerous is prioritizing ancient treaties over the actual happiness and autonomy of your ruler." Her eyes swept the council with open contempt. "Or perhaps you're all so old that you've forgotten what it means to choose your own destiny." The chamber exploded. 3 elders were on their feet, voices raised in outrage. 2 more looked apoplectic. Only Elder Whitmore remained seated, her expression inscrutable as she studied Charlotte with the intensity of a hunter sizing up potential prey. Charles should have intervened, should have reminded Charlotte of her place, should have smoothed over the insult. Instead, he found himself smirking. This was what he craved. Not polite, political maneuvering, but raw honesty. Charlotte didn't hide behind flowery language or diplomatic niceties. She said exactly what he was thinking, gave voice to the rebellion burning in his chest. Enough. His alpha command silenced the chamber instantly. Charles rose from his throne, his massive frame radiating dominance. "This discussion is over. Charlotte will remain by my side. The arrangement with Eva is void. And if the Moonstone Pack takes issue with that, they're welcome to bring their complaints directly to me." "Your Majesty, I said enough." Charles's eyes burned gold, his wolf rising close to the surface. Council dismissed. The elders filed out in rigid, furious silence. Only Elder Whitmore paused at the door, turning back to fix Charles with a look of profound disappointment. "Your mother would be heartbroken," she said quietly. Then she was gone. The chamber door boomed shut, leaving Charles and Charlotte alone in the vast space. The moment they were private, Charlotte turned to him, her eyes alight with victory and hunger. "You were magnificent," she breathed. "Did you see their faces?" "Like you'd struck them." "I basically did." Charles ran a hand through his dark hair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow uncertainty. "My mother is gone," Charlotte interrupted firmly. She stepped into his space, her hands sliding up his chest to link behind his neck. And you're finally free to rule as you see fit. As you should rule, with strength, not slavish devotion to tradition. She kissed him, and Charles felt that familiar dark pull, the way she seemed to siphon away his doubts and replace them with pure, uncomplicated desire. When she pulled back, her smile was wicked. Now, my king, I believe you promised to show me just how magnificent you can be when you stop holding back. Charles's wolf whined again, that same persistent note of warning. But Charles ignored it. He swept Charlotte into his arms, carrying her through the private corridors toward his chambers. She laughed against his throat, her fingers tangling in his hair, her scent wrapping around him like chains disguised as silk ribbons. In his chambers, Charlotte wasted no time. She pushed him onto the massive bed, straddling his hips with predatory grace. Her dress rode up her thighs as she ground against him, drawing a growl from deep in his chest. "This is what you need," she whispered, her hands working at his belt. "Not some simpering girl who'll bore you within a week. You need fire. You need passion. You need someone who can match you." Charles's hands gripped her hips hard enough to bruise as she freed him from his trousers. The rational part of his mind, the part that sounded disturbingly like his mother, tried to surface, tried to question why he felt more possessed than passionate, more addicted than affectionate. But then Charlotte sank down onto him, and all thought fled. She rode him with wild abandon, her head thrown back, her dark hair cascading down her spine. The pleasure was intense, almost painful, laced with something that made his wolf howl in confusion rather than satisfaction. When they finished, Charlotte collapsed against his chest, her breathing ragged. Charles stared at the ceiling, his heart racing, feeling simultaneously sated and hollow. "I love you," Charlotte murmured against his skin. Charles opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. He'd never said them back. Not once in 6 months. Why couldn't he say them? Charlotte seemed to sense his hesitation. She rose up, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Something cold and calculating that was gone so quickly, Charles thought he'd imagined it. "You'll learn to say it," she said, her voice soft but with an edge of steel. "Once you've fully freed yourself from their expectations. Once you've proven you're truly your own man." She kissed him again, and Charles let himself sink into it, desperate to escape the gnawing doubt that had begun to take root in his chest. Outside his window, the moon had risen, full and silver, nothing like the blood-red moon of his mother's death. But somehow, Charles felt like he was still drowning in darkness. Chapter 2. Eva and the Fated Scent. 2 days later, the formal presentation. Eva Moonstone had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She stood in the antechamber adjacent to the Silver Crest throne room, her hands folded serenely in front of her, her spine straight, her expression calm. The pale blue gown she wore was exquisite, traditional, modest, and designed to showcase the noble breeding of the Moonstone line without being ostentatious. She looked every inch the future Lunar Queen. Inside, she was terrified. "Remember," her mother had whispered before departing, "Queen Felicia chose you specifically. She saw the strength in you. Whatever happens, you hold your head high." But Queen Felicia was dead, and from the whispers Eva had heard during her 3-day journey to the Silver Crest territory, the new Alpha King was complicated. The massive doors to the throne room swung open. An attendant bowed stiffly. "Miss Eva Moonstone, you may enter." Eva took a breath, slow, measured, controlled, and stepped forward. The throne room was magnificent. Soaring ceilings, columns of black marble veined with silver, windows that let in the late afternoon sun in great golden shafts. And at the far end, elevated on a dais of polished obsidian, sat Alpha King Charles Blackthorne. Eva's first thought was that he was even more imposing in person than in the formal portraits. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of raw physical power that marked a warrior as much as a king. Dark hair, strong jaw, and eyes that caught the light with an unnatural golden gleam. Her second thought was that he looked deeply unhappy to see her. And her third thought, the one that hit her like a physical blow, was the scent. Oh gods, the scent. It rolled over her in waves the moment she crossed the threshold. Pine and smoke and something wild and masculine that made her wolf surge to attention for the first time in her life. Every instinct she had screamed, "Mate, mate, ours." Eva stumbled, actually stumbled, her carefully practiced grace deserting her as the bond tried to snap into place like a steel cable pulling taut. Number. No, this couldn't be. Fated mates were rare. The council had assured her that the arrangement was political, practical, that affection would grow over time through mutual respect and shared duty. They hadn't said anything about this overwhelming, all-consuming certainty that the man sitting on that throne was hers in a way that transcended choice or logic. Eva forced herself to keep walking, though every step felt like moving through water. The council members lining the walls watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to calculation. She was acutely aware of how many witnesses there were to this moment. And then she saw the woman. Standing beside the throne, draped in black silk and confidence, was a stunning creature with raven hair and cold, assessing eyes. Her hand rested on the arm of Charles's throne with casual possession. Eva's wolf snarled. Charles was staring at her, at Eva, with an expression she couldn't read. His jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the arms of his throne with white-knuckled intensity. For a moment, Eva thought she saw something flicker in those golden eyes. Shock? Recognition? Then his expression went carefully, deliberately blank. Eva reached the base of the dais and sank into the formal curtsy she'd practiced 1,000 times. Your Majesty, I am Eva Moonstone, daughter of Alpha Marcus of the Moonstone Pack. I come at your invitation, and in accordance with the arrangement made by our honoured late Queen Felicia, may her memory be eternal. Silence. When she rose, Charles was still staring at her with that terrible, unreadable expression. The dark-haired woman beside him leaned down, whispering something in his ear. Charles's jaw tightened further. "Miss Moonstone," he said finally, his voice rough. "I'm sure your journey was long. I trust you were made comfortable." "Very comfortable, Your Majesty. Your hospitality has been most gracious." Another silence, this one stretching until Eva could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The mate bond was screaming now, demanding she acknowledge it, claim it, make this man understand that they were meant for each other by forces older than pack law. But Eva had been trained by Queen Felicia. She knew better than to speak of such things publicly, especially when it was clear that the Alpha King was conflicted. Charles stood abruptly. The movement sent a ripple of power through the room, making every wolf present straighten instinctively. "Miss Moonstone," he said, his voice carrying the weight of alpha command. "I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding." Eva's blood ran cold. The arrangement made by my late mother was done without my knowledge or consent. Charles descended the dais steps, each footfall echoing like a death knell. He stopped 3 paces from her, and Eva had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I do not intend to honor it. The throne room went absolutely silent. Eva felt the words hit her like a physical blow, even though some part of her had been preparing for this moment since she'd heard the whispers about the king and his unsuitable companion. I see, she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. Queen Felicia would have been proud. May I ask if there is a specific concern about my suitability, Your Majesty? Something that might be... It's not about you. Charles' expression was carved from stone. I've chosen another path. The dark-haired woman had descended the dais as well, coming to stand beside Charles with proprietary ease. This close, Eva could see the triumph glittering in her eyes, could sense something off about her scent, something that made Eva's wolf hackles rise with instinctive warning. You must understand, the woman said, her voice honey-smooth. The Alpha King must follow his heart, not outdated contracts. I'm sure you'll find... Charlotte. Charles's tone was sharp, cutting her off. But the message had been delivered. Eva looked between them. At the way Charlotte stood just slightly too close, at the possessive tilt of her body toward Charles, at the way his attention kept sliding toward the other woman even as he addressed Eva. The mate bond was howling, a wounded animal sound in the back of Eva's consciousness. Her wolf was in agony, unable to understand why their fated mate was rejecting them before they'd even had a chance. But Eva had spent 22 years learning to master her emotions, to prioritize duty and grace over personal desire. She drew herself up to her full height, still a head shorter than Charles, but radiating quiet dignity. I understand, Your Majesty, she said clearly. I thank you for your honesty. If I may request permission to remain in Silver Crest territory for a brief time to make arrangements for my return journey? Of course, Charles said, relief flickering across his face. You'll be afforded every courtesy. I'll arrange an escort. That won't be necessary, Eva interrupted gently. I'm capable of seeing to my own needs. If you'll excuse me. She curtsied again, perfect form, despite the fact that her world was crumbling, and turned to leave. She made it 5 steps before Charles's voice stopped her. Miss Moonstone. Eva paused but didn't turn around. This isn't personal. Eva almost laughed. Instead, she glanced back over her shoulder, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Of course not, Your Majesty. How could it be personal? We've only just met. Then she walked out of the throne room, her head high and her heart breaking with every step. She didn't see the way Charles's hands clenched into fists, or the way his wolf raged against his skin, screaming at him to call her back. She didn't see the calculating smile that spread across Charlotte's face, and she didn't hear the quiet words spoken by a tall, silver-eyed wolf standing near the back of the room. Martin, head of the Royal Guard, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing concern. This, Martin murmured to himself, is going to end in blood. Eva made it to her assigned chambers before the tears came. The rooms were beautiful, a suite fit for visiting royalty, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest, plush furniture in soft creams and silvers, and a bed large enough for 3 wolves. Under different circumstances, she would have been delighted. Now, all she could see was the cage it represented. The moment the door closed behind her, Eva's knees buckled. She caught herself on the back of an armchair, her breath coming in sharp gasps as the reality of what had just happened crashed over her. Rejected. Publicly rejected by her fated mate. The bond was still there, a living thing pulsing in her chest, connecting her to a man who wanted nothing to do with her. It hurt in ways she hadn't known were possible, not just emotionally, but physically. Her wolf was in agony, whining and clawing, unable to comprehend why their mate had turned them away. Eva pressed a hand to her chest, trying to breathe through the pain. Queen Felicia had prepared her for so many eventualities, but not this. Not the soul-deep certainty of a fated bond being rejected before it even had a chance to form. A soft knock at the door made her straighten quickly, wiping at her eyes. "Miss Moonstone?" A female voice, tentative. "I'm Lydia, assigned as your personal attendant during your stay." "May I enter?" Eva took a breath, forcing her voice to steady. "Please." The door opened to reveal a petite woman with warm brown eyes and an apologetic smile. She carried a tray with tea and small cakes, but her expression suggested she knew the refreshments would be of little comfort. "I thought you might need some time to settle," Lydia said gently, setting the tray on a side table. "The staff has been instructed to provide anything you require for your comfort." "Thank you," Eva said, proud that her voice remained level. "That's very kind." Lydia hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Miss, if I may, what happened in the throne room was witnessed by many. You conducted yourself with extraordinary grace. Queen Felicia would have been proud." Eva's composure cracked slightly at the mention of the late queen. "You knew her." "I served her for 15 years, Lydia said, her eyes misting. "She was a remarkable woman. And she spoke of you often in those final weeks. She believed." Lydia paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "She believed you were exactly what this kingdom needed." "It seems her son disagrees," Eva said, unable to keep the bitterness entirely from her tone. Lydia's expression turned troubled. "The king is not himself. Since Queen Felicia's passing, he's been—" She trailed off, clearly unwilling to speak ill of her sovereign. "Under someone else's influence?" Eva supplied quietly. Lydia's silence was answer enough. Eva moved to the window, looking out over the sprawling Silver Crest estate. The forest beyond was deep and wild, calling to her wolf with promises of freedom and escape. How easy it would be to shift and run, to leave this place and never look back. But she was her father's daughter, raised to face adversity with dignity rather than flee from it. "Lydia," she said slowly, "how long does custom dictate I should remain before departing?" 3 days minimum, miss. Any less would be seen as an insult to Silver Crest hospitality. 3 days. 72 hours in the same territory as her fated mate, knowing he was with another woman, feeling the bond stretching and aching with every moment they remained apart. It would be torture. "Then I'll stay 3 days," Eva said firmly, "and I'll conduct myself as Queen Felicia taught me, with grace, dignity, and strength, even if it killed her." Chapter 3. Charlotte's Violence Day. 2 of Eva's Stay. Eva discovered the palace gardens just after dawn, when the mist still clung to the hedgerows and the morning sun painted everything in shades of gold and rose. It was the first moment of peace she'd found since the rejection. She walked the carefully tended paths, her fingers trailing over fragrant blooms, trying not to think about the fact that Charles was somewhere in this same palace, probably still in bed with the woman he'd chosen over her. The mate bond twisted in her chest at the thought, a sharp reminder of everything she'd lost before ever having it. "You're up early." Eva spun, her hand flying to her chest. A tall man stood in the shadow of an archway, broad-shouldered, silver-eyed, with the bearing of a warrior. He wore the insignia of the royal guard, and Eva recognized him from the throne room. "I apologize," he said, stepping forward with his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "I didn't mean to startle you." I'm Martin Reed, head of the Royal Guard. Eva Moonstone, she replied automatically, then felt foolish. Of course he knew who she was. Everyone knew who she was. The rejected mate, the political embarrassment. If Martin noticed her discomfort, he was kind enough not to show it. The gardens are beautiful this time of morning, aren't they? Queen Felicia used to walk here every dawn. She said it helped her think clearly before facing the politics of the day. Eva felt a pang at the mention of the late Queen. She must have been an extraordinary woman. She was. Martin moved to stand beside Eva, both of them looking out over the garden. She had a gift for seeing people's true nature beneath the masks they wore. It's a talent her son hasn't inherited, unfortunately. The comment was dangerously close to criticism of the king. Eva glanced at Martin sharply, but his expression remained neutral. I should return to my chambers, Eva said carefully. I wouldn't want to keep you from your duties. Actually, Martin said, I was hoping you might join me for breakfast. There's a small courtyard on the east side of the palace where the staff takes meals, much more pleasant than eating alone in your rooms. Eva hesitated. The invitation was kind, but she didn't want to cause any complications. She was already the center of enough gossip and speculation. As if reading her thoughts, Martin added, It's completely proper, I assure you. Several members of the household staff will be there. I simply thought you might appreciate some company that doesn't involve political maneuvering or pitying looks. Despite everything, Eva found herself smiling slightly. That does sound appealing. The courtyard was indeed lovely. A small, sun-drenched space with a fountain at the center and several tables scattered beneath a pergola heavy with climbing roses. True to Martin's word, a handful of servants were already there, enjoying bread and fruit before the day's work began. They looked surprised to see Eva, but Martin's easy manner smoothed over any awkwardness. Within minutes, Eva found herself seated with a plate of fresh pastries and strong tea, listening to Martin's dry observations about court politics. You have to understand, Martin was saying. The council has been trying to marry Charles off since he turned 18. Every season, they'd parade a new set of eligible females through the palace. His mother used to take bets on how quickly he'd find an excuse to escape. Eva found herself laughing despite her heartache. Sounds exhausting. It was. For everyone involved. Martin's expression turned more serious. Queen Felicia only pushed the arrangement with you because she genuinely believed you'd be good for him. She wasn't interested in political alliances or bloodline purity. She wanted someone who could handle the weight of the crown without being crushed by it. Eva looked down at her tea. Well, it seems her son had other ideas. Charles is grieving, Martin said quietly, and making catastrophically poor decisions as a result. But grief doesn't last forever. Eventually he'll wake up and realize what he's done. By then, I'll be long gone, Eva said firmly. I'm not going to wait around hoping he changes his mind. I have more self-respect than that. Good. Martin's approval was evident. You should. But that doesn't mean you need to spend your remaining time here hiding in your rooms. You're the daughter of an alpha, trained by Queen Felicia herself. Hold your head high. It was exactly what Eva needed to hear. She felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease, felt her wolf settle slightly from its frantic pacing. They talked for another hour, until the courtyard began to fill with more servants starting their day. Martin walked Eva back toward the main palace, their conversation flowing easily. They were just entering the grand hallway when a voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the air. How touching. Eva's wolf bristled. She turned to see Charlotte descending the main staircase, draped in a gown of deep burgundy that left little to the imagination. Her dark eyes glittered with malice as she approached. The rejected little wolf finds a new playmate so quickly, Charlotte purred. Tell me, Martin, does the king know you're entertaining his cast-offs? Martin's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. Miss Moonstone is a guest of this palace and will be treated with respect. I suggest you remember that. Charlotte laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Respect? For a woman who couldn't even hold a king's interest for 5 minutes? She circled Eva slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. Tell me, Eva, does it hurt? Knowing he chose me over you? Knowing that while you were perfecting your curtsies and your pretty manners, he was in my bed, calling my name? Eva felt the words hit like physical blows, but she refused to let Charlotte see her flinch. She met the other woman's gaze steadily, keeping her voice cool and calm. I wish you joy of it, Eva said simply. Charlotte's eyes flashed with fury. For a moment, Eva saw something shift beneath her features, something dark and wrong that made her wolf recoil in instinctive fear. Then Charlotte's expression smoothed back into cruel amusement. Oh, I intend to enjoy every moment. Tell me, do you know what it's like to have an alpha king completely under your control? To know that he'd burn this entire kingdom to ash if you asked him to? That's enough, Martin said sharply, stepping slightly in front of Eva. You've made your point. Have I? Charlotte tilted her head, studying Eva with unsettling intensity. I don't think I have. You see, I can sense it on you, little wolf. That pathetic bond trying to form, reaching out for someone who will never reach back. It must be agony. Eva's control finally cracked slightly. What do you want from me? I want you gone, Charlotte said, all pretense of civility dropping away. I want you to leave Silver Crest and never come back. I want every trace of you erased so thoroughly that Charles forgets you ever existed. That's exactly what I'm planning to do, Eva said quietly. In 2 more days, I'll leave, and you'll never see me again. 2 days is too long. Charlotte moved closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that only Eva could hear. Accidents happen in this palace, little wolf. People fall downstairs. They eat something that doesn't agree with them. They go for walks in the forest and simply disappear. Martin moved then, his hand going to the hilt of the blade at his hip. Touch her, and you'll answer to me. Charlotte's laugh was genuinely amused. Oh, Martin, always so noble. Does she know about your little infatuation? How you've been watching her since she arrived, seeing her as your chance to play hero? That's not... Martin started, but Charlotte was already gliding away, throwing one final poisonous smile over her shoulder. Tick-tock, little wolf. 2 days. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Ava's knees went weak. Martin caught her elbow, steadying her. Are you all right? No, Eva admitted, her voice shaking. There's something wrong with her, Martin. Did you see her face for just a moment? I saw. Martin's expression was grim. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe. He guided her through a series of corridors to a small library tucked away in a quiet wing of the palace. The moment the door closed behind them, Eva sank into a chair, her hands trembling. She's not just a jealous lover, Eva said quietly. There's something else. Something dark. Martin nodded slowly. I've suspected as much. The Queen noticed it too in those final weeks. She tried to warn Charles, but he wouldn't listen. He was already too far under Charlotte's influence. What is she? I don't know, but I intend to find out. Martin knelt beside Eva's chair, his silver eyes serious. In the meantime, I need you to promise me you won't go anywhere alone. Charlotte's threats aren't idle. If she sees you as an obstacle to her claim on the throne— I'm leaving in 2 days anyway, Eva protested. Why would she risk exposing herself? Because you're his fated mate, Martin said bluntly. Even if Charles is too blind to acknowledge it right now, the bond exists. Charlotte knows that. As long as you're alive, you're a threat to everything she's worked for. Eva's blood ran cold. So what do I do? You survive the next 2 days, and you let me help you do it. The rest of the day passed in tense vigilance. Martin assigned 2 trusted guards to shadow Eva discreetly, and Lydia became her constant companion within the palace itself. Eva spent the afternoon in the library, trying to lose herself in books, but her mind kept drifting to Charles. The mate bond was a constant ache, made worse by the occasional glimpse of him in the corridors, always with Charlotte at his side, always looking more haggard than the day before. Once, their eyes met across a crowded hall. For a heartbeat, Eva saw something flicker in those golden depths. Recognition, longing, regret. Charles actually took a step toward her, his body moving as if pulled by invisible strings. Then Charlotte's hand closed around his arm, her lips moving close to his ear, and whatever moment had existed shattered. Charles's expression went blank, and he turned away without a word. Eva fled before the tears could fall. That evening, Lydia brought dinner to Eva's rooms, insisting she eat, even though Eva had no appetite. You need to keep your strength up, miss, Lydia said gently, setting out dishes of roasted meat and vegetables. Martin told me about this morning. We're all keeping watch. Why? Eva asked quietly. Why do you care what happens to me? I'm nobody to you. Lydia paused in her work, then sat down across from Eva. Queen Felicia asked me to look after you, before she died. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would help you however I could. She knew— Lydia's voice caught. She knew things would be difficult. Did she know about Charlotte? She suspected. In those final days, she tried to talk to Charles, to warn him, but the grief had already taken hold of him, and Charlotte had her claws in deep. Lydia leaned forward, her expression intense. The Queen believed in you, Miss Eva. She believed you were strong enough to survive whatever came. Don't prove her wrong. Eva felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never even met Queen Felicia, not properly, yet the woman had still tried to protect her from beyond the grave. I won't, Eva promised. I'll make it through these 2 days. And then I'll go home and rebuild my life. Even if her heart would remain here, tied to a man who didn't want her. That night Eva woke to the sound of splintering wood. She bolted upright in bed, her wolf surging to alert. The sitting room door. She could hear someone trying to break through the lock, the wood groaning under pressure. Heart hammering, Eva rolled out of bed and ran to the window. They were 3 stories up, too high to jump even in wolf form. She spun, looking for a weapon, anything. The door burst open. Charlotte stood in the doorway, and this time there was no pretense of humanity. Her eyes glowed red in the darkness, and shadows writhed around her like living things. Her beautiful face had twisted into something terrible, something ancient and hungry. 2 days was too generous. Charlotte hissed, her voice layered with something that wasn't entirely human. I should have ended you the moment you walked into that throne room. Eva backed toward the window, her wolf snarling and ready to fight even though she knew she was outmatched. If you kill me, they'll know. Charles will know. Charles will believe whatever I tell him to believe. Charlotte laughed, advancing slowly. That's what my kind does, little wolf. We whisper in the dark places of the mind. We feed on grief and desire. We twist good men into our puppets. You're a demon, Eva breathed. Half demon, Charlotte corrected almost pleasantly. My mother was wolf. My father was something much older. It makes for a useful combination. All the physical power of your kind, plus abilities that most wolves can't even comprehend. She raised her hand, and the shadows coalesced into something sharp and dark. Charles is mine. The throne is mine. And you're nothing but an inconvenient loose end. Eva's back hit the window. She was trapped. No way out. No help coming. The window shattered inward. A massive silver wolf burst through in an explosion of glass and moonlight, placing itself between Eva and Charlotte with a snarl that shook the walls. Martin. He must have been patrolling outside in wolf form, must have heard or sensed the attack. Charlotte's eyes blazed with fury. You just made a fatal mistake, guard dog. Run. Martin's wolf form couldn't speak, but Eva heard the command in her mind, the desperate plea. Instead, Eva felt her own wolf surge forward. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. Queen Felicia had believed she was strong enough for this, strong enough to fight, strong enough to survive, strong enough to protect those who protected her. Eva shifted, her bones cracking and reforming, fur rippling across her skin. Her wolf was smaller than Martin's, built for speed rather than raw power, but her eyes burned with determination. Charlotte looked between them and laughed. Two noble fools instead of one. How poetic. Then she attacked. The battle was brutal and swift. Charlotte's demon-enhanced strength made her a devastating opponent, and the shadow blades she wielded cut deep. Martin took blow after blow, his silver fur staining red, but he never stopped placing himself between Charlotte and Eva. Eva darted in and out, using her speed to harry Charlotte from the sides, preventing the demon wolf from focusing all her attention on Martin. She could feel her own blood dripping from a dozen cuts, could feel her strength waning, but she refused to stop. They were losing. Charlotte was too strong, too fast, too other. Martin went down with a pained yelp, a shadow blade buried in his shoulder. Charlotte loomed over him, raising her hand for the killing blow. Enough! The voice was thunder and alpha command combined, so powerful it physically drove Charlotte back several paces. Charles stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing pure gold, his body rippling with barely contained power. Behind him, palace guards poured into the room, but they stopped at a gesture from their king. Charles's gaze swept the destroyed room, the shattered window, the blood on the floor, Martin's wounded form, Eva's battered wolf, and finally Charlotte, her demon nature fully revealed, shadows still writhing around her hands. Charles, Charlotte purred, her voice sliding back toward seductive, despite the monstrous power crackling around her. They attacked me, darling. I was simply defending myself. But something in Charles's expression suggested he wasn't hearing her the way he usually did. He looked at Martin, loyal unto death, at Eva, standing over Martin's fallen form despite her own injuries, ready to keep fighting. And then he looked at Charlotte, really looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "You're not what you claimed to be," Charles said, his voice deadly quiet. Charlotte's smile faltered. "Charles, get out of my sight." The alpha command in his voice made every wolf in the room whimper, even in their human forms. "Before I forget you're female and rip your throat out myself." Charlotte's eyes flashed red. "You'll regret this." The only thing I regret, Charles said coldly, is not listening to my mother. Charlotte snarled, her demon nature surging forward. But then she saw the ring of guards, saw the absolute conviction in Charles's eyes, and something in her calculation shifted. "This isn't over," she hissed. Then she was gone, dissolving into shadows that poured out through the shattered window. The moment she disappeared, Charles was moving. He dropped to his knees beside Martin, his hands already glowing with the healing power that came with his alpha bloodline. "Hold on," he commanded. "That's an order, soldier." Martin's wolf whined, but stilled under the king's hands. Charles turned his head, and his eyes met Eva's wolf form. The mate bond surged between them, finally fully acknowledged, finally seen. "Shift back," Charles said quietly. "Let me see how badly you're hurt." Eva's wolf hesitated. Everything in her wanted to trust him, to accept his help, to collapse into the safety of her mate's presence. But she'd been rejected once. She wouldn't survive it again. She shifted back to human form, grateful when one of the guards immediately threw a cloak around her naked, bloodied body. She stood tall, despite her injuries, despite the way her legs trembled with exhaustion. "I'm fine," she lied. "Help Martin." Charles's jaw clenched. "Eva—" "In 2 days I'm leaving," Eva interrupted, her voice steady. "What happened here changes nothing. You made your choice. I'm simply ensuring I survive long enough to make mine." With that, she turned and walked from her destroyed chambers, leaving Charles kneeling in the wreckage of what his blindness had wrought. Chapter 4. The Midpoint Crisis. The Sacrifice. The following morning. Emergency Council Session. Charles sat at the head of the council table, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. The events of the previous night had shattered whatever illusions he'd been clinging to about Charlotte, about his choices, about everything. Elder Thorne wasted no time. "Your Majesty, we must address what happened. That creature nearly killed a member of your guard and your fated mate under your own roof." "Half demon," Charles said flatly, according to Eva's testimony. "And you brought her into this palace," Elder Whitmore added, her voice sharp as a blade. "Gave her access to our most sacred spaces, nearly announced her as your Luna. Your mother warned you." "I know what my mother said." Charles's fist slammed on the table, making everyone jump, then quieter. "I know. And I didn't listen." The council exchanged glances. This was the first time since Queen Felicia's death that Charles had admitted to any kind of error. "What matters now?" Martin said from his position against the wall. He'd refused to stay in the infirmary despite his injuries. "Is finding Charlotte before she causes more damage. She won't give up on the throne easily." "Agreed," Charles said. "I want every able-bodied guard searching the territory. If she's still here, I want her found. If she's fled, I want to know where she went." "And Miss Moonstone?" Elder Whitmore asked carefully. "She's scheduled to leave tomorrow." Charles's hands clenched on the table. "She stays." The room went silent. "Your Majesty," Martin said carefully, "Eva has made it very clear that she intends to leave. You can't force her to stay." "She's my fated mate," Charles said, the words feeling like broken glass in his throat. "I was too blind, too stupid, too consumed by grief to see it when she first arrived. But I know it now. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to claim her, to protect her, to make right what I destroyed." He looked around the table, his eyes haunted. "Tell me how to fix this. Tell me how to undo the damage I've done." Elder Thorne stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You can't undo it, boy. You can only move forward, and pray she's willing to forgive you. She won't even let me near her, Charles admitted. I've tried 3 times this morning to check on her wounds. Each time she turns me away. Can you blame her? Martin's voice was gentle but firm. You rejected her publicly, chose another woman over her, and then that woman tried to kill her. Eva has every right to protect herself from further harm. I know that. Charles pushed up from the table, pacing like a caged animal. But the bond, it's driving me mad. My wolf is tearing itself apart, knowing our mate is hurt and won't let us help her. Then you need to give her something she can't refuse, Elder Whitmore said thoughtfully. Something that proves your intentions have changed. What could I possibly give her that would make up for what I've done? The truth, Elder Thorne said simply. The full truth about Charlotte's influence, about your mother's warnings, about the mate bond. And then you give her the one thing she hasn't had since she arrived here. Choice. Real choice, with no pressure, no expectations, no contracts. Charles stared at the old wolf. You want me to offer her the bond with no strings attached? To let her refuse me if that's what she chooses? It's the only way, Elder Whitmore said. You took her choice away once. You have to give it back. Later that day. The palace gardens. Eva was walking the garden paths, Lydia at her side, when Charles appeared on the trail ahead of them. Eva's first instinct was to turn and leave, but something in Charles's expression made her pause. He looked wrecked, exhausted, tormented, and utterly sincere in a way she hadn't seen before. Miss Moonstone, he said formally, may I have a moment of your time? Please? Eva glanced at Lydia, who gave her an encouraging nod before stepping discreetly away. Alone with Charles, Eva felt the mate bond surge painfully. Her wolf whined, desperate to go to him, but Eva held firm. What do you want? She asked quietly. To apologize, Charles said. And to explain, though I know no explanation will be sufficient? You're right, Eva said coolly. It won't be. Charles flinched, but nodded. I know, but I need to try anyway. He gestured to a nearby bench. Will you sit? Just for a moment. Against her better judgment, Eva sat. Charles remained standing, as if he didn't deserve the comfort of sitting beside her. When my mother died, he began, his voice rough, I felt like I was drowning. She was the only person who truly understood the weight of the crown, who could guide me through the politics and the power games. Without her, I was lost. So you turned to Charlotte, Eva said. I thought I was choosing freedom, Charles said bitterly. She represented everything the council wasn't: spontaneous, passionate, unconcerned with duty and bloodlines. She made me feel like I was still myself, not just a crown to be managed. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't see through my grief, was that she wasn't giving me freedom. She was putting different chains on me. Eva remained silent, waiting. My mother tried to warn me, Charles continued. In her final weeks, she told me Charlotte wasn't what she seemed, that there was something wrong about her. But I was so angry at the world for taking her away that I refused to listen. I thought she was just being controlling, just trying to dictate my choices from beyond the grave. He laughed bitterly. I was such a fool. Yes, Eva agreed simply. You were. Charles met her eyes, and Eva saw genuine remorse there. The moment you walked into that throne room, I knew. The mate bond hit me like a physical blow. Every instinct I had screamed that you were mine, that I'd found what I'd been searching for without even knowing I was searching. And yet you still rejected me, Eva said, keeping her voice level despite the pain the memory caused. Charlotte was already in my head, Charles said quietly. By the time you arrived, she'd twisted me so thoroughly that I couldn't distinguish between my own thoughts and the ones she was feeding me. When I felt the bond, I thought it was another cage, another attempt to control me. He shook his head. I couldn't have been more wrong. Eva looked away, watching a butterfly dance between the roses. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve the truth. And because… Charles's voice dropped. Because I'm asking, no, begging, for a chance to make this right. You can't make it right, Eva said, finally looking at him again. What's done is done. The rejection happened. The entire court witnessed it. Nothing you say now can change that. I know. Charles moved to sit on the bench, but carefully, leaving significant space between them. But the bond is still there. We're still fated mates, even if I was too blind to acknowledge it properly. A bond means nothing if it's not honored, Eva said. You taught me that. Charles closed his eyes, the words hitting him like blows. You're right. Again. But Eva… He opened his eyes, and they were burning gold. I'm asking for a chance. Not to force you into anything, not to demand that you accept me because of some ancient bond, but to court you properly, to let you see who I really am when I'm not being manipulated by a demon, to earn what should have been freely given. Eva's heart twisted. Every part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to fall into his arms and let the bond complete itself. But she'd spent her entire life learning to lead with her head, not her heart. I'm supposed to leave tomorrow, she said quietly. I know. The counsel pointed that out quite forcefully. Charles's lips quirked in a sad smile. I'm asking you to stay. Not as a rejected mate, not as an arranged match, but as yourself, as Eva. Give me time to prove that I can be the mate you deserve. And if I decide you can't, Eva asked, if I decide the damage is too deep? Charles's expression turned agonized, but his voice remained steady. Then I'll let you go. I'll release you from any obligation, any bond. I'll make sure your pack knows the rejection was my failure, not yours. And I'll spend the rest of my very long life regretting the greatest mistake I've ever made. Eva studied him carefully. This was different from the Charles who had rejected her in the throne room. That Charles had been hard, defensive, under Charlotte's influence. This Charles was raw, honest, vulnerable. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Charles stood, and Eva could see the effort it cost him not to reach for her. Whatever you decide, you're under my protection. Charlotte won't touch you again. I swear it on my crown, on my mother's memory, on everything I hold sacred. He started to walk away, then paused. For what it's worth, my wolf is in agony being separated from you, and so am I. Every moment you're hurting, I feel it through the bond. Every moment you're unhappy, it's like someone's twisting a knife in my chest. And I know… His voice cracked slightly. I know I have no right to feel that way, not after what I did. But it's the truth. Then he was gone, leaving Eva alone in the garden with her thoughts and her treacherous, hopeful heart. That evening Eva found Martin in the training yard, working through sword forms despite his healing injuries. He looked up when she approached, immediately setting aside his weapon. You should be resting, Eva scolded gently. So should you, Martin countered, taking in her own barely healed wounds. And yet here we are. They moved to sit on a bench overlooking the yard, watching the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and gold. He asked me to stay, Eva said finally. Martin nodded. I thought he might. He apologized, explained everything about Charlotte's influence, asked for a chance to court me properly. Eva pulled her knees up to her chest, looking younger than her years. I don't know what to do, Martin. Do you want to stay? Martin asked carefully. Part of me does, Eva admitted. The mate bond is real, and it's powerful. Every instinct I have says Charles is mine, that we're meant to be together. But the other part, the part that watched him choose someone else, that felt the rejection like a physical wound, that part wants to run as far and as fast as I can. Martin was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you something, Eva? Something I probably shouldn't? Eva nodded. I've served the Silver Crest crown for 15 years. I've watched Charles grow from an arrogant young prince into a capable king, and I've never seen him as broken as he's been these past 24 hours. Martin turned to face her. Charlotte's influence was real. I've been doing research, consulting with our pack historians. Half-demons can manipulate emotions, feed on grief and desire, twist a person's natural inclinations into something darker. Charles didn't stand a chance, not in the state he was in after his mother's death. Are you saying he's not responsible for his choices? Eva asked. No, Martin said firmly. He's absolutely responsible. He chose to ignore his mother's warnings. He chose to prioritize his own desires over his duties. He chose to reject you publicly rather than giving the bond a chance. He paused. But he's also acknowledging those failures now. He's asking for a chance to make amends. That's not nothing. What would Queen Felicia want me to do? Eva asked quietly. Martin smiled. She'd want you to choose for yourself, not because of duty or bonds or political advantage. She believed in following your heart, but also in making choices with your eyes wide open. Eva sat with that for a while, watching the sun sink below the horizon. If I stay, she said slowly, I'm not just risking my heart. I'm risking my pride, my self-respect. Everyone will know I came back to a man who rejected me. Or they'll know you're strong enough to give second chances, Martin offered. Brave enough to fight for something worth having, even when it's difficult. Eva looked at him, really looked at him. You've been so kind to me, Martin. Why? Martin's expression turned wistful. Because you remind me of the Queen. She had that same quiet strength, that same grace under pressure. And because... He hesitated, then continued honestly, because I think you could be extraordinary for this kingdom if you choose to stay. Not as Charles's mate, but as your own person, as the leader Queen Felicia saw in you. That's a lot of pressure, Eva said with a small smile. You can handle it. Martin stood, offering his hand to help her up. Whatever you decide, Eva, you have my friendship and my loyalty. That won't change. Eva took his hand, feeling grateful for this unexpected ally. Thank you, Martin. For everything. As she walked back to her chambers, Eva felt the mate bond pulling her toward Charles's side of the palace. She could sense him there, could feel his wolf pacing restlessly, mirroring her own confusion. Tomorrow, she would give him her answer. She just had to figure out what that answer would be. Chapter 5. Jealousy and Doubt. 3 days later, Eva had decided to stay. Not forever, she'd made that clear. She'd agreed to 3 weeks, 21 days for Charles to prove himself, to court her properly, to show her that he could be the mate she deserved. If, at the end of that time, she still felt the wound of rejection was too deep, she would leave, and he would not stop her. Charles had agreed to her terms with visible relief and gratitude. The first 2 days had been careful, tentative. Charles courted her the way a wolf courts his mate, bringing her flowers from the garden, arranging private meals where they could talk without the pressure of the court watching, sharing stories about his mother and his childhood. Eva found herself softening despite her best efforts. This Charles, thoughtful, self-aware, genuinely interested in knowing her as a person rather than just a political pawn, was dangerously appealing. But she refused to make it easy for him. On the third day, Martin invited her to join him for a ride through the forest. It was perfectly innocent. Martin had been Eva's friend and protector from the moment she arrived, and both of them valued the easy companionship they'd developed. What Eva hadn't anticipated was Charles's reaction. They'd returned to the stables in late afternoon, laughing at something Martin had said about a particularly stubborn horse he'd tried to train. Eva's cheeks were flushed from the ride, her hair slightly wind-blown, and she looked more relaxed than she had since arriving at Silver Crest. Charles was waiting in the stable yard. The moment Eva saw him, she knew something was wrong. His jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides, and his eyes were burning that dangerous gold that meant his wolf was very close to the surface. "Your Majesty," Martin said, surprised. "We didn't expect—" "Where were you?" Charles's voice was controlled, but Eva could hear the edge beneath it. "Riding," Eva said, confused by his tone. "Martin was kind enough to show me some of the territory." "For 4 hours?" Charles bit out. Martin's eyes narrowed. "Is there a problem, Charles?" The use of his name, rather than his title, was deliberate, a reminder that they'd been friends long before Charles wore the crown. But Charles didn't seem to notice. His eyes were locked on Eva, tracking over her as if searching for injuries or evidence of something else. "You were alone with him?" "For hours." Understanding dawned, and with it, a flare of anger. "Yes," Eva said coolly. "I was spending time with a friend." "Is that not allowed?" "That's not—" Charles stopped, visibly fighting for control. "You should have told me you were leaving the palace grounds." "Why?" Eva asked, her voice dropping to something dangerously calm. "Am I a prisoner here, Your Majesty? Do I need your permission to go riding?" "Of course not," Charles ground out. "But after Charlotte—" "After Charlotte, you assigned guards to watch me," Eva interrupted, "2 of whom accompanied us on the ride. So I was perfectly safe." She stepped closer, her own wolf rising to meet his. "What's really bothering you, Charles?" Charles's control snapped. "What's bothering me?" he said, his voice rough with barely contained emotion, "is that I can smell him on you. His scent is all over you, mixed with yours, and my wolf is losing its mind." The possessive jealousy in his tone was undeniable. Martin wisely took several steps back, recognizing this for what it was: an alpha male confronting his mate's perceived interest in another. Eva should have been offended, should have been angry at the presumption, at the possessive tone. But instead, she felt something else entirely: hope. This wasn't the indifferent Charles who had rejected her. This was a wolf driven half mad by the thought of losing his mate, unable to control the primal instincts that came with the bond. "We went riding," Eva said quietly. "That's all. Martin is my friend." "He wants to be more than your friend," Charles said flatly. "That's not true," Martin interjected, but Charles shot him a look that could have melted steel. "Isn't it? You've been by her side since the moment she arrived. You risked your life for her. You spend every possible moment in her company." Charles's voice dropped to something almost pained. "And I can't even blame you. She's extraordinary. Anyone with eyes can see that." The raw honesty in his voice made Eva's breath catch. "But she's mine," Charles continued, his eyes still locked on Eva. My mate, my heart, the other half of my soul. And I know I have no right to feel that way after what I did. I know I'm supposed to give you space, let you choose, not pressure you. But seeing you with him, smelling his scent on your skin. He closed his eyes, his whole body vibrating with tension. I can't pretend I'm fine with it. I'm not that strong. Eva felt the mate bond surging between them, responding to Charles's raw emotional honesty. This was what she'd needed to see. Not the controlled courtship of the past few days, but this. Real, messy, desperate truth. "Martin?" she said quietly, not taking her eyes off Charles. "Could you give us a moment?" Martin hesitated, but Eva gave him a reassuring nod. He departed, though not before squeezing her shoulder in silent support. Alone with Charles, Eva felt the full weight of the mate bond pressing down on her. This close, she could see the dark circles under his eyes, could see how much weight he'd lost in the past week, could feel the desperation and longing rolling off him in waves. "You rejected me," she said quietly. "Publicly. Cruelly. You chose another woman over me before we'd even spoken a word to each other." "I know." Charles's voice was hoarse. "And now you're angry that I spent time with a friend? Someone who's been nothing but kind and respectful to me?" "I'm not angry at you," Charles said. "I'm angry at myself. Because I see the way Martin looks at you, with respect and admiration and genuine care, and I realize that's how I should have looked at you from the beginning. That's what you deserved. And instead His voice broke. "Instead, I destroyed everything before we even had a chance." Eva took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, could hear his heart hammering in his chest. "You're jealous." "Insanely," Charles admitted. "Irrationally. Completely. The thought of another male touching you, making you laugh, being there for you in ways I can't. It's driving me insane." "Good," Eva said simply. Charles's eyes snapped to hers, confusion and hope warring in their golden depths. "You should feel what I felt," Eva continued, her voice steady. "When I watched you with Charlotte, when I knew you were choosing her over me every single day. You should understand what it's like to see your mate with someone else." "Eva." "But there's a difference," Eva interrupted, reaching up to place one hand on his chest, right over his thundering heart. "Martin is my friend. Nothing more. There's no attraction, no desire, no bond. When I'm with him, I feel safe and comfortable. But I don't feel this." She pressed her hand harder against his chest, and Charles sucked in a breath as the mate bond flared between them, electric and undeniable. "I don't feel like my skin is on fire," Eva continued, her voice dropping to something softer. "I don't feel like I can't breathe when he walks away. I don't feel like every part of me is screaming to close the distance and claim what's mine." Charles's hands came up to grip her waist, gentle despite the obvious effort it took him to maintain control. "Eva, please." 3 weeks, Eva reminded him. That was the deal. You get 3 weeks to prove yourself. But Charles... She looked up at him, letting him see the steel beneath her softness. "You don't get to dictate who I spend time with. You don't get to be possessive when you haven't earned that right yet. And you certainly don't get to make demands when you're still proving you can be trusted." Charles's jaw clenched, his wolf clearly warring with his human side. "You're right," he forced out. "I'm sorry. I don't have the right to—" Eva stood on her toes, bringing her face close to his. "But," she whispered, "I appreciate the honesty. I needed to see that you feel this too, that the bond isn't just one-sided desperation." Charles's grip on her waist tightened. It's not. Eva, if you had any idea how much… Show me, Eva challenged. For the next 2.5 weeks, show me. Not with jealousy and possession, but with action. Prove that you can be the mate I need, not just the one the bond says I'm supposed to have. I will, Charles promised, his voice fervent. I swear it. Eva stepped back, and Charles let her go despite the obvious cost. She could see his wolf raging behind his eyes, demanding he pull her back, claim her, mark her as his so no other male would dare look at her. But he didn't. He let her walk away, respecting her boundaries, even when it clearly tore him apart. Eva made it 3 steps before she paused, looking back over her shoulder. Charles? Yes. Tomorrow morning. Breakfast. Just the 2 of us. I want to hear about your mother, about what she was really like, beyond the stories everyone tells. Charles' expression transformed, hope blooming across his features. I'd like that. Eva nodded once, then continued toward the palace, feeling Charles's eyes on her every step of the way. Behind her, she heard Martin's quiet voice. You're playing with fire, brother. I know, Charles replied, his voice rough. But for her, I'd burn the whole world down. That night Eva couldn't sleep. She lay in her chambers, new ones, since her original rooms were still being repaired, staring at the ceiling and feeling the mate bond pulse with every beat of her heart. She could sense Charles somewhere in the palace, could feel his restlessness mirroring her own. The jealousy scene had shaken something loose inside her. For the first time since the rejection, she'd seen Charles completely unguarded, his emotions raw and honest. He hadn't tried to manipulate or control her. He'd simply been honest about his feelings, even when that honesty made him vulnerable. It was exactly what she'd needed to see. But was it enough? Eva pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the bond ache with longing. Her wolf whined, wanting nothing more than to go to their mate, to complete the bond that had been denied for too long. Not yet, Eva told her firmly. He has to earn us. We're worth more than being someone's second choice. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. Come in. Lydia entered, carrying a tea tray. I thought you might need this, miss. The housekeeper makes a special blend for sleeplessness. You're a treasure, Lydia. Eva accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the soothing scent of chamomile and lavender. Lydia hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. May I speak plainly, miss? Please. The entire palace is talking about what happened in the stables today. The king's jealousy, your challenge to him, the way you walked away. Lydia's eyes were warm with approval. Queen Felicia would have been so proud. You're not letting him off easily, but you're not closing the door entirely either. It's exactly the balance a Luna needs. Eva's throat tightened. I'm not a Luna, Lydia. I might never be. You're more Luna than anyone who's set foot in this palace in generations, Lydia said firmly. You have the strength for it, the wisdom, and whether you choose to stay with the king or not, you've already proven you're worthy of the title. After Lydia left, Eva returned to bed, her mind churning with possibilities and fears. Tomorrow morning, she'd share breakfast with Charles. She'd listen to his stories about his mother, would try to see past the rejection to the man beneath. And maybe, just maybe, she'd start to believe that second chances were possible. The next morning, Charles had arranged breakfast in a private garden courtyard, away from the prying eyes of the court. The table was set simply but elegantly, with fresh flowers and Eva's favourite pastries, details he must have asked Lydia about. The thoughtfulness made Eva's heart squeeze. Charles stood when she entered, and Eva noticed immediately that he looked better than he had in days. Still tired, still carrying the weight of his mistakes, but there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for asking." Eva settled into her seat, accepting the tea he poured for her. "And for not having anyone else here. I know the council probably wants to observe our courtship to ensure it's proceeding properly." Charles's lips quirked. Elder Thorne did suggest he should be present as a chaperone. I told him that if he tried, I'd assign him to inventory duty in the dungeons for the next month. Eva laughed, despite herself. "You didn't." "I absolutely did." "You should have seen his face." Charles's expression sobered. "Eva, I want you to know. Everything I do from this point forward is about you, your comfort, your happiness, your choice. Not the council's approval, not political advantage, just you." "That's a dangerous way for a king to think," Eva observed. "Maybe. But it's how a mate should think." Charles reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "Tell me to back away if this is too much." Eva looked at his hand, large, scarred from training and battle, trembling slightly with the effort of not closing the distance. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The mate bond sang. Charles's breath caught, his fingers closing gently around hers. For a long moment, they simply sat there, connected, letting the bond settle into something warm and right. "Tell me about your mother," Eva said softly. "I've heard all the official stories, the wise queen, the strong ruler, the diplomatic genius. But what was she like when it was just you and her?" Charles' expression turned wistful. "She was fierce. Not in an aggressive way, but in the way she loved. When I was young, maybe 7 or 8, I got into a fight with the son of a visiting alpha. The boy was older, bigger, and I was losing badly. My father wanted to punish me for embarrassing the crown. But your mother..." She pulled me aside, tended my wounds herself, and told me that knowing when to fight and when to walk away was the mark of true strength. Then she spent the next month teaching me defensive combat techniques, so I'd never be caught unprepared again. Charles smiled at the memory. "She didn't coddle me. She prepared me. Everything she did was about making sure I'd be strong enough to survive this world." "Including arranging our match?" "Especially that." Charles's thumb traced circles on the back of Eva's hand. "In her final weeks, she talked about you constantly. How you had a spine of steel beneath that gentle exterior. How you'd been trained not just in politics and protocol, but in genuine leadership. She said..." His voice caught. "She said you'd be able to handle me at my worst and love me at my best. That you'd never let me become a tyrant or a puppet." Eva felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish I'd had the chance to know her." "She knew you, though. She watched you grow up, received reports from your pack, even visited your territory a few times incognito. She chose you deliberately, Eva, not because of bloodlines or politics, but because she genuinely believed you were the right person for the role. For me." "And you threw that away," Eva said quietly. Charles flinched, but didn't pull away. "Yes, I threw away the greatest gift she ever tried to give me because I was drowning in grief, and Charlotte was there to pull me under. I wish..." He stopped, his jaw working. "I wish I could go back. I wish I'd listened. I wish I'd given you a chance before I destroyed everything." "You can't go back," Eva said. "None of us can. But Charles..." She squeezed his hand. "I'm here now." We both are. And maybe that's enough. Charles looked up, hope blazing in his golden eyes. Is it? Enough? I don't know yet, Eva admitted. But I'm willing to find out. They talked for hours, breakfast growing cold as they shared stories. Charles about his childhood, his training, his fears about being king. Eva about growing up in the Moonstone pack, about the pressure of being groomed for a crown, about her own secret desire to be chosen for herself rather than her pedigree. It was the conversation they should have had the day she arrived, the foundation they should have built before any talk of bonds or duty. It felt like healing. 5 days later, the courtship was progressing slowly but steadily. Charles was proving himself day by day, respecting Eva's boundaries, listening when she spoke, including her in discussions about the kingdom, not because she was supposed to be lunar, but because he valued her perspective. The court was beginning to take notice. Eva was walking through the palace corridors, heading to the library, when she overheard 2 servants talking in a side alcove. Have you seen the way he looks at her now? Like she hung the moon. About time. That Charlotte creature nearly destroyed him. Miss Eva is what this kingdom needs. Do you think she'll actually accept him? After what he did. I hope so. She's got him wrapped around her finger and she doesn't even seem to realize it. Eva slipped past before they could notice her, but the words stayed with her. Did she have Charles wrapped around her finger? And if so, was that power or responsibility? She found Martin in the library, reviewing guard schedules. He looked up when she entered, his silver eyes warm with welcome. Eva, I was hoping you'd stop by. Trouble with the patrols? She asked, noticing the furrow in his brow. Nothing serious. Just some reports of strange activity in the eastern forest. Probably nothing. But after Charlotte, I'm not taking chances. He set aside the papers. How are you? Really? Eva sank into a chair across from him. Confused. Hopeful. Terrified. All of it at once. That sounds about right for someone falling in love with the man who broke her heart. I'm not... Eva stopped, then sighed. Am I that transparent? Only to someone who's watching carefully. Martin's smile was gentle, holding no trace of the jealousy or resentment she might have expected. Eva, I need you to know something. When I offered you friendship, when I've spent time with you these past weeks, it's been genuine. I care about you, but I'm not in love with you. Eva blinked, surprised by the admission. Charles seems to think otherwise. Charles sees competition everywhere because he's terrified of losing you. Martin leaned forward. The truth is, you remind me of someone I lost a long time ago. A mate who died before we could complete the bond. Being around you, it's like having a piece of that light back. But it's not romantic. It's comfort, familiarity, the feeling of being understood by someone who shares a similar strength. I'm sorry, Eva said softly. I didn't know you'd lost your mate. It was years ago. I've made peace with it. Martin's expression turned serious. But I'm telling you this because I don't want to be a complication in your relationship with Charles. If you choose him, I'll step back. And if you choose to leave, I'll help you do that too. Either way, my loyalty is to you, not to whatever role you might fill. Eva felt tears prick her eyes. How do you always know exactly what to say? Practice. And the fact that Queen Felicia trained me to be observant. Martin smiled. She'd be proud of you, Eva. The way you're handling this, the way you're making Charles work for what should have been freely given, it's exactly what he needs, what the kingdom needs. Before Eva could respond, the library door burst open. A guard stood there, breathing hard. Captain Martin, Miss Moonstone, you need to come quickly. It's Charlotte. She's returned. Chapter 6. The demon revealed the throne room was in chaos. Charlotte stood in the center of the space, and this time she made no effort to hide her true nature. Her eyes glowed crimson, shadows writhed around her like living serpents, and the air itself seemed to darken in her presence. "Did you miss me?" she purred, her voice layered with demonic resonance. Charles stood on the dais, his body radiating alpha power, his eyes pure gold. "You were warned never to return." "Oh, Charles. My sweet, foolish Charles." Charlotte's laugh echoed unnaturally. "Did you really think I'd give up so easily? I invested months in you, shaped you, molded you, prepared you to be my perfect puppet king. Do you think that's something I'd simply walk away from?" Eva arrived with Martin just in time to hear this. She felt the mate bond surge protectively, felt Charles's awareness of her presence, even though his eyes never left Charlotte. "You used me," Charles said, his voice deadly calm. "You fed on my grief, twisted my instincts, turned me into someone I didn't recognize." "I made you interesting," Charlotte countered. "You were so boring before I found you, all duty and honor and tragic nobility. I gave you passion. I gave you fire." "You gave me poison," Charles corrected, "and I was too blind to see it until you tried to kill my mate." Charlotte's eyes snapped to Eva, and the hatred there was palpable. Her, that insipid little princess with her perfect manners and her pathetic devotion to a dead queen's wishes. She's nothing, Charles. She'll bore you within a month. "She's everything," Charles said simply. "She's strong enough to stand up to me. Brave enough to give me a second chance I don't deserve. Smart enough to see through your manipulation when I couldn't. She's the mate you tried to make me reject, and the queen this kingdom needs." How touching. Charlotte's form began to shift, her demon nature pushing closer to the surface. "Then I'll just have to kill her. And you. And anyone else who stands between me and the power I've earned." "You've earned nothing but banishment and death," Elder Thorne said, stepping forward despite his age. The other council members moved to flank him, presenting a united front. "Leave now, demon spawn, and we might let you live." Charlotte's laughter was sharp as breaking glass. "You think your little pack can stop me?" "I've been feeding on Charles's power for months. His grief, his desire, his rage. It's all made me stronger than any of you can imagine." She raised her hands, and the shadows exploded outward. The attack was devastating. Guards were thrown back, council members ducked behind overturned furniture, and the throne room descended into pandemonium. Charles shifted mid-leap, his massive wolf form crashing into Charlotte before she could target Eva. They tumbled across the marble floor in a tangle of fur and shadows, both moving with supernatural speed. "Get everyone out!" Martin shouted to his guards, even as he shifted to join the fight. But Eva didn't run. She stood in the center of the chaos, watching her mate battle a demon-wolf hybrid that had nearly destroyed him, and felt something ignite inside her. Queen Felicia had trained her for this, not just to be a political asset or a pretty ornament, but to be a true Luna, a leader, a fighter, a force to be reckoned with. Eva shifted. Her wolf was smaller than Charles's, built for speed and agility rather than raw power. But what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination. She darted into the fray, her teeth finding purchase on Charlotte's flank, tearing through shadow and flesh alike. Charlotte shrieked in fury and pain, trying to shake Eva off. But Eva held on, her wolf snarling with primal determination. "This is our mate, our pack, our kingdom, and you will not have it." Charles took advantage of the distraction, his jaws closing around Charlotte's throat. For a moment, Eva thought it was over, but then Charlotte's demon power surged, and Charles was thrown back with brutal force. He crashed into the dais, his wolf form reverting to human, blood streaming from a deep gash across his chest. "Charles!" Eva's cry was both human and wolf, anguished and enraged. She launched herself at Charlotte with renewed fury, no longer caring about strategy or survival. All that mattered was protecting her mate. Martin joined her, his silver wolf coordinating with Eva's movements. Together, they drove Charlotte back, step by bloody step, their combined assault overwhelming even her demon-enhanced strength. But Charlotte was desperate now, her power spiraling out of control. The shadows around her condensed into lethal blades, slashing in all directions. Eva felt one catch her shoulder, felt another slice across her ribs. Pain exploded through her, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Behind her, she heard Charles struggling to his feet, heard the rage in his voice. "Eva, get back!" But it was too late. Charlotte's demon form fully emerged. Something terrible and ancient, neither fully wolf nor fully human. Her voice became a shriek that shattered windows and made every wolf in the room whimper in pain. "If I can't have him, no one will." The shadows coalesced into a single, massive blade aimed directly at Charles's heart. Eva didn't think. She simply moved. Her wolf form intercepted the strike, taking the shadow blade meant for Charles directly through her side. The pain was beyond anything she'd ever imagined. Not just physical, but spiritual. Like the demon's power was trying to tear apart her very soul. But she'd kept it from reaching Charles. That was all that mattered. Eva's wolf form collapsed, blood pooling beneath her. She could hear Charles roaring in rage and anguish, could feel Martin's desperate attempts to staunch her bleeding, could sense the entire court frozen in horror. Through dimming vision, she saw Charles fully embrace his alpha power, not the conflicted, manipulated king he'd been, but the true ruler he was meant to be. His form seemed to grow, his power radiating like physical pressure, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You touched my mate," he said, his voice resonating with alpha command that made even Charlotte flinch. "You tried to destroy my kingdom. You corrupted the grief I felt for my mother. But worst of all," his form began to shift, becoming something more than just a wolf, more than just an alpha. "You made me hurt the one person in this world who is truly innocent, who deserves only love and protection and honor." "Charles, don't!" Elder Whitmore's voice was sharp with warning. "That power will consume you." "Then let it," Charles snarled. "She's worth it." He attacked with the full force of his alpha heritage, the power that had been dormant in his bloodline, waiting for a moment of absolute necessity. It was the same power his mother had possessed, the reason their line had ruled for generations, the power to utterly destroy anything that threatened the pack. Charlotte didn't stand a chance. Charles's assault was relentless, brutal, final. He tore through her demon powers like tissue paper, his alpha strength overwhelming her stolen power. In less than a minute, it was over. Charlotte's body dissolved into shadows and smoke, her dying scream echoing through the throne room before fading into silence. And then Charles was at Eva's side, his hands glowing with healing power, tears streaming down his face. "Don't you dare," he choked out. "Don't you dare die on me. Not now. Not when I've just found you. Eva, please." Eva's eyes fluttered open. Even through the pain, she managed a weak smile. "Took you. Long enough. You infuriating, brave, impossible woman," Charles whispered, his healing power pouring into her. "Why would you do that? Why would you risk yourself for me after everything I've done?" Because Eva's voice was barely audible. Because you're my mate. And that's what mates do. The mate bond flared between them, stronger than ever, fueled by Charles's healing power and Eva's fierce determination to survive. The palace healers rushed forward, but Charles wouldn't let anyone else touch her. "I've got her," he said, his voice breaking. "I've got her. She's mine. She's not leaving me. Eva, do you hear me? You're not leaving me. I won't allow it." Eva's laugh was pained but genuine. "Such an alpha, thinking you can command death itself." "For you, I'd fight death and win," Charles said fiercely. "I'd tear apart the underworld itself. Charles." Eva reached up with trembling fingers, touching his face. "I'm not dying. Hurts like hell, but I'm not dying." The relief on Charles's face was almost painful to witness. He pressed his forehead to hers, his healing continuing even as his tears fell on her fur. "I love you," he whispered. "I should have said it the moment you walked into that throne room. I should have dropped to my knees and thanked whatever gods brought you to me. Instead, I rejected you, hurt you, nearly lost you. But Eva, I love you, completely, eternally, with everything I am." Eva shifted back to human form, not caring about her nudity or the blood or the court watching. She cupped Charles's face in both hands, making him look at her. "I love you too," she said clearly, "even though you're an idiot who nearly threw away the best thing that ever happened to him." Charles laughed through his tears. "I really am an idiot." "Yes, but you're my idiot." Eva pulled him down for a kiss. Bloody, desperate, perfect. The throne room erupted in cheers. Chapter 7 and 8. The True Bond and Claiming. 3 days later, private ceremony. Eva had insisted on a quiet claiming ceremony, much to the council's dismay. After everything they'd been through, she wanted the moment to be about them, not politics or spectacle. Charles had agreed immediately, grateful for any opportunity to complete the bond that had been denied for too long. They stood in the palace gardens at sunset, with only Martin, Lydia, and the council elders present. Eva wore a simple white gown, her healing wounds hidden beneath the silk. Charles wore his formal alpha regalia, but his eyes held only softness as he looked at his mate. Elder Whitmore performed the ceremony, her aged voice steady and strong. "We gather tonight to witness what should have been acknowledged from the beginning, the mating bond between Alpha King Charles Blackthorne and Eva Moonstone. Though the path to this moment has been marked by pain and trial, we recognize that the strongest bonds are forged in adversity." Charles took Eva's hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her palms. "Eva, I stand before you not as a king, but as a wolf who was lost until you found him. I rejected you when I should have claimed you. I chose darkness when you offered light. I nearly destroyed the greatest gift the fates ever gave me. But you," his voice caught, "you gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. You showed me strength and grace and forgiveness. You literally took a blade meant for my heart. There are no words adequate to express what you mean to me, but I'll spend eternity trying to show you." Eva's eyes shimmered with tears. "Charles, when I first came here, I thought I was fulfilling a duty, an arrangement made before we were born, a political alliance dressed up as destiny. But the moment I saw you, I knew. The bond was real. And even when you rejected me, even when you chose another, that bond remained. It hurt, gods, it hurt. But it never broke. Because true mate bonds can't be severed by rejection or pain or even death. They simply are." She took a breath, her voice strengthening. "I choose you," Charles Blackthorne. Not because of duty or destiny or a contract signed by our parents. I choose you because you fight for what's right, because you're brave enough to admit when you're wrong, because you loved your mother enough to grieve deeply, and you love me enough to risk everything. I choose you because you're mine, and I'm yours, and nothing, not demons, not doubt, not even our own mistakes, can change that. Charles pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I claim you, Eva Moonstone, as my mate, my Luna, my queen, and my heart. From this day until my last breath, I am yours. And I claim you, Charles Blackthorne, as my mate, my alpha, my king, and my heart. From this day until my last breath, I am yours. The bond snapped into place fully, not the tentative, aching thing it had been, but something whole and powerful and right. Eva gasped as the connection flooded through her, bringing with it Charles's emotions, his wolf, his very essence. And Charles fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd just completed. Through the bond, he could feel Eva's strength, her compassion, her absolute certainty in him despite everything. It was humbling and exhilarating and more powerful than any alpha command or royal authority. I love you, he whispered against her hands, which he'd brought to his lips. My queen, my mate, my Eva. I love you, she replied, running her fingers through his hair. My alpha, my mate, my Charles. Elder Whitmore's smile was radiant. Then by the power vested in me by the Silver Crest pack and the ancient laws that govern all wolves, I declare this bond sealed, this claiming complete. What fate has joined, let no one tear asunder. The small assembly erupted in joyful howls, both human voices and wolf calls mixing in celebration. That night, the royal chambers. Charles carried Eva over the threshold of their shared chambers, properly this time, with no shadows of Charlotte or duty or pain between them. He set her down gently, mindful of her still healing wounds, but Eva was having none of it. She pulled him down for a kiss that was anything but gentle, her fingers working at the buttons of his formal shirt. Eva, Charles breathed against her lips. You're still recovering. We don't have to. Charles Blackthorne, if you think I've waited this long to complete our bond only to be told to rest, you're delusional. Eva's eyes flashed with heat and humour. I'm your mate, your Luna, and I'm claiming what's mine. Charles's control, already threadbare, snapped. He swept her into his arms, carrying her to the massive bed that had once seemed too large for one wolf, but now seemed perfect for two. The claiming was everything the bond had promised. Intense, passionate, overwhelming in the best possible way. Charles worshipped every inch of Eva's skin, whispering love and devotion between kisses. Eva gave as good as she got, her hands and mouth mapping his body with possessive intent. When they finally joined, the mate bond exploded into full power. For a moment, they were one being, one heart, one soul, one purpose. Eva felt Charles's wolf merge with hers, felt his absolute devotion and love, felt the full weight of his regret and his determination to make every day of their immortal lives a demonstration of his commitment. And Charles felt Eva's strength, her capacity for forgiveness, her fierce protective instinct, and the depth of love she'd hidden behind careful dignity. They moved together, building toward completion, the bond amplifying every sensation until they both shattered with cries that echoed through the royal wing. Afterward, Charles held Eva close, their bodies still entwined, his hand gentle on the healing wounds at her side. I almost lost you, he whispered into her hair. When you took that blade for me, I saw my entire life flash before my eyes, a life without you, and it was unbearable. But you didn't lose me, Eva reminded him, pressing a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. I'm here. I'm yours. And I'm not going anywhere. Promise me something, Charles said seriously, pulling back enough to meet her eyes. Promise me you'll never doubt how much I love you, even when I'm being an idiot, and I will be occasionally. Promise me you'll remember this moment, this feeling, this bond. I promise, Eva said, her smile turning playful. But you have to promise me something too. Anything. Promise me you'll trust me. Trust my strength, my judgment, my ability to stand beside you as an equal. No more trying to protect me from danger or decision-making. I'm your Luna now. That means partnership, not protection. Charles's eyes softened with respect and love. I promise. Though it's going to be hard watching you face danger, knowing I can't always step in. Welcome to how I felt watching you fight Charlotte, Eva said wryly. But we'll figure it out. Together. Together. Charles agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. They made love twice more that night, each time the bond growing stronger, more settled, more right. As dawn approached, they lay tangled together, satisfied and complete. What do you think your mother would say? Eva asked quietly, tracing patterns on Charles's chest. If she could see us now? Charles was silent for a long moment. I think she'd say, I told you so in about a dozen different ways. Then she'd pull you aside and give you all my embarrassing childhood stories to use as blackmail. Eva laughed. I would have liked that. She would have loved you, Charles said seriously. She already did love you. She saw in you what I was too blind to see. A queen strong enough to handle the crown, a mate strong enough to handle me, and a woman brave enough to forgive the unforgivable. It wasn't unforgivable, Eva said softly. It was human. Or wolf. Or whatever we are. You were grieving and manipulated. I'm not excusing it. You still hurt me, and that hurt won't disappear overnight. But I understand it now, and more importantly, I trust that you won't make the same mistake again. Never, Charles vowed. I swear on my crown, my life, and this bond. I will never give you cause to doubt me again. Eva snuggled deeper into his embrace, feeling sleep finally pulling at her. Good. Because if you do, I'll let Martin give you an attitude adjustment. Charles's laugh rumbled through his chest. Martin would enjoy that far too much. As Eva drifted off to sleep, safe in her mate's arms, she felt Queen Felicia's presence like a warm blanket, approval and love, and the satisfaction of a plan that had finally come to fruition. Thank you, Eva thought, sending the words toward whatever afterlife the old queen inhabited. Thank you for believing in me. And somewhere in the vast beyond, Eva could have sworn she heard a reply. I always did, dear girl. I always did. Epilogue. 5 years later. The gardens of Silver Crest Palace were in full bloom, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through the carefully tended paths. Charles sat on a bench beneath his mother's favourite oak tree, watching his mate chase their twin pups through the flowers. Eva had shed her formal lunar gown for simple clothes, her hair escaping its braid, as 3-year-old Alexander and Sophia led her on a merry adventure. Papa, Sophia called, her golden eyes, inherited from Charles, sparkling with mischief. Mama says you have to come play too. Does she now? Charles stood, his heart so full it hurt. These moments, simple, domestic, perfect, were worth more than any crown or conquest. Eva jogged over, slightly breathless, her face flushed and beautiful. "Your children have far too much energy. I blame you." "My children?" Charles pulled her close, kissing her temple. "They're definitely ours when they're being difficult." "Papa, catch." Alexander threw a flower crown he'd been making, and Charles caught it with exaggerated fumbling that made both pups dissolve into giggles. A throat cleared nearby, and Martin approached with his usual measured stride. He'd been promoted to the king's personal advisor 2 years ago, a role that suited his tactical mind and loyalty perfectly. "Sorry to interrupt family time," Martin said, though his smile suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "The council is assembling for the afternoon session. Something about trade negotiations with the northern packs." Charles groaned. "Can't they handle it without me?" "You're the Alpha King, brother." "They literally can't." Eva squeezed Charles's hand. "Go. I'll keep these 2 troublemakers occupied. But tonight is ours," Charles finished. "I remember. Dinner in our chambers, just the 2 of us, after the pups are asleep." "And you promised to tell me more stories about your mother," Eva reminded him. "The pups should know their grandmother, even if only through our memories." Charles's expression softened. 5 years, and Eva still honoured Queen Felicia's memory with the same respect she showed everything she cared about. It was one of the 1,000 reasons he loved her more each day. "Tonight?" he promised, then turned to his children. "You 2, behave for your mother. And Alexander, no shifting until you're at least 5. We talked about this." "But Papa—" "At least 5, Charles repeated firmly, though his eyes sparkled with amusement. "Your mother's heart can't take finding a wolf pup hanging from the chandelier again." Eva swatted his arm. "That was your fault for teaching him that shifting was fun and natural at 2 years old." "I maintain it is fun and natural. I just didn't expect him to take to it quite so enthusiastically." As Charles walked toward the palace with Martin, he heard Eva's laughter mixing with their children's voices. The sound wrapped around his heart like a physical thing, grounding him, reminding him of everything he'd almost lost. "She's good for you," Martin observed. "You know that, right? You're a better king, a better leader, a better wolf because of her." "I know." Charles paused, looking back at his family. "I almost destroyed it all, Martin. If Eva hadn't been strong enough to give me a second chance." "But she was, and you earned that second chance every day since." Martin clapped him on the shoulder. "Stop dwelling on past mistakes and focus on the present blessings. That's what Queen Felicia would have advised." Charles smiled. "You sound like my mother." "I'll take that as a compliment." In the council chambers, the session proceeded smoothly. Eva joined them halfway through. As Lunar Queen, she had equal authority in pack matters. And Charles watched with pride as she negotiated trade terms with diplomatic skill that would have made his mother weep with joy. When one of the Northern Alphas tried to push for unfavourable terms, Eva's response was swift and firm. "I understand your position, Alpha Garrett. However, the Silver Crest pack has been more than fair in our dealings. If you continue to press for concessions we cannot reasonably grant, we'll be forced to reconsider the entire agreement." The Northern Alpha backed down immediately. Eva's reputation as a fair but unbending Lunar had spread throughout the territories. She was beloved by her people and respected, sometimes feared, by rival packs. Charles caught her eye across the council table and sent a pulse of love and admiration through their bond. Eva's lips curved in a private smile that was for him alone. After the session ended, they walked back through the palace together, hands linked, discussing the day's events with the easy companionship of true partners. Alpha Garrett will accept our terms by tomorrow, Eva predicted. He was posturing for his counsel, but he knows we're offering fair value. My brilliant mate, Charles murmured, pulling her into a quiet alcove and stealing a kiss. Have I told you today how extraordinary you are? Only 3 times. I think you're slipping. Eva's eyes danced with amusement. Then let me remedy that immediately. Charles proceeded to list, in detail, all the ways she amazed him, punctuating each point with kisses. Her wisdom, kiss. Her strength, kiss. Her compassion, kiss. Her ability to make him laugh even during tedious trade negotiations, longer kiss. And her stunning beauty that still took his breath away, kiss that turned heated until a passing servant cleared their throat awkwardly. Eva pulled back, her cheeks flushed. Charles Blackthorne, we are not teenagers sneaking around the palace. No, we're the Alpha King and Lunar Queen, which means we can do whatever we want, Charles said with false solemnity. I'm fairly certain that's in the official rules. It absolutely is not. Then we should make it a rule. I'll call an emergency council session. Eva laughed, the sound warming him from the inside out. Come on. Your pups need their bedtime story, and you promised me a quiet evening. That night, after Alexander and Sophia were tucked into their beds, following 3 stories, 2 glasses of water, and 1 emergency that involved a lost toy wolf that was exactly where it had been all along, Charles and Eva finally retreated to their private chambers. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a simple dinner had been laid out on the balcony overlooking the forest. They ate slowly, enjoying the peace and each other's company. Tell me about your mother's garden, Eva said softly. You promised the children stories, but I want to hear them first. Charles smiled, remembering. She created it herself, you know. Every flower, every path. My father thought she was mad, spending so much time on frivolous pursuits when she could be handling state business. But she said the garden was where she thought most clearly, that getting her hands dirty in the soil reminded her that even kings and queens are just wolves who need the earth beneath their feet. She sounds wise beyond measure. She was, and she would have adored watching you raise our children, seeing the way you balance being a mother, a Lunar, and your own person. She valued that kind of strength above all else. Charles reached across the table, taking Eva's hand. You honor her memory every day, Eva. Not by trying to be her, but by being yourself, which is exactly what she hoped you'd do. Eva's eyes glistened with tears. I wish she'd had more time with you. That she could have met our pups. I used to feel that way too. But now... Charles looked out over the forest, toward the moon rising full and silver. Now I think she knew. Somehow she knew her time was short, and she made sure I'd have you to guide me through the aftermath. She gave me the greatest gift possible, a mate who would save me from myself. You give me too much credit. You saved yourself, Charles. You chose to see the truth about Charlotte. You chose to fight for us. Only because you showed me it was worth fighting for. Charles stood, moving to kneel beside her chair. Even after 5 years, even with 2 children and a kingdom to run, the mate bond still sang between them with undimmed intensity. I love you, Eva, more now than the day we completed the bond, more tomorrow than today, forever increasing, never diminishing. Eva cupped his face, her touch gentle. I love you too, my mate, my king, my Charles. He pulled her down for a kiss, and dinner was forgotten as they lost themselves in each other. Later, Much later, they lay tangled together in their bed, sated and content. "Do you ever regret it?" Charles asked quietly. "Giving me that second chance? Staying when you could have left?" Eva propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the moonlight. "Never. Not once. Do you know why?" "Tell me." "Because our story, the rejection, the pain, the fight to find our way back to each other, it made us stronger. If you had accepted me immediately, if everything had been easy, we might have taken each other for granted. But we didn't get that luxury. We had to earn this bond, this love, this partnership, and that makes it precious beyond measure." Charles pulled her back down against his chest, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "You are the wisest wolf I've ever known." "I learned from the best," Eva murmured, already drifting towards sleep. "Your mother taught me well, even from beyond the grave." As Charles felt his mate relax into sleep, her heartbeat steady against his, he sent a silent thought toward his mother's memory. "Thank you. For seeing what I couldn't. For choosing her. For believing we'd find our way to each other. I promise I'll spend every day being worthy of the gift you gave me." And in the garden below, in the place where Queen Felicia had spent so many hours planning and dreaming, a single night-blooming flower opened its petals to the moon. A flower that hadn't bloomed in 5 years, not since the old queen's death. Some gifts transcended death itself. Some bonds were truly eternal. And some love stories, though beginning in rejection and pain, ended in the kind of happiness that echoed through generations. Author's note. Dear readers, thank you for joining me on Charles and Eva's journey from rejection to redemption, from pain to profound love. This story explores a theme close to my heart, the idea that our greatest mistakes don't have to define us. Charles made terrible choices, hurt someone innocent, and nearly destroyed his own happiness. But he was also brave enough to admit his failures, strong enough to fight his way back, and humble enough to accept that forgiveness had to be earned, not demanded. Eva showed us a different kind of strength, the strength to stand firm in her worth, to give second chances without sacrificing self-respect, and to love someone without losing herself in the process. She was never a doormat, never weak, never merely waiting to be saved. She was always the queen Felicia knew she would be. The mate bond in this story isn't just about destiny or fate, it's about choice. Charles and Eva had to choose each other again and again, despite the pain and mistakes and complications. That's what made their bond true and lasting. I hope their story reminds you that second chances are possible, but they must be earned through action, not just words. True love doesn't erase past pain, but it can heal and transform it. Strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's fighting, sometimes it's forgiving, and sometimes it's simply refusing to give up on yourself. The best partnerships are those where both people grow, challenge, and support each other as equals. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear from you. Your reviews, messages, and support make this writing journey worthwhile. Until the next story, Charlie P. And of course, Martin did eventually find happiness with a visiting wolf from the Eastern Territories. But that's a story for another book. The end bonus scene. 10 years later, the Silver Crest annual pack gathering. Mama! Papa! Aunt Lydia says there's going to be dancing, and I want to learn the traditional circle dance, but Alexander says I'm too little, but I'm not too little, right, Mama? Eva laughed, catching her daughter before Sophia could trip over her own feet in excitement. At 8 years old, she was all energy and enthusiasm, her father's golden eyes and her mother's diplomatic grace warring with typical puppy exuberance. You're exactly the right size for the circle dance, Eva assured her, smoothing Sophia's dark hair. And your brother is just being protective, as always. I am not being protective, Alexander protested with all the dignity his 8 years could muster. I'm being practical. The circle dance requires coordination, and Sophia trips over flat ground. I do not. You literally tripped twice on the way to breakfast this morning. That was the rug's fault. Charles swooped in, catching both children in his arms before the argument could escalate. All right, both of you. Your mother and I have an announcement to make to the pack, and we need you on your best behavior. Can you manage that? Yes, Papa, they chorused, though Alexander shot his sister a look that clearly said, I'm watching you. The pack gathering was in full swing, with wolves from across the territory assembled in the great courtyard. Music, laughter, and the sounds of celebration filled the air. It had been 10 years since Charles and Eva's claiming ceremony, and the kingdom had flourished under their joint rule. Charles took the raised platform first, Eva at his side, their hands linked. The crowd quieted immediately, all eyes on their beloved king and queen. My pack! My family! Charles began, his voice carrying clearly. 10 years ago, I stood before you and made the worst mistake of my life. I rejected a gift from the fates themselves, nearly destroyed our kingdom in the process, and had to fight my way back to the honor and love I'd thrown away. The crowd was silent, remembering. That story had become legend, the rejected queen who became the kingdom's salvation. But my extraordinary mate gave me a second chance I didn't deserve, and together, we've built something stronger than either of us could have achieved alone. Charles turned to Eva, his love evident. Tonight, we want to share news that fills us with joy and gratitude. Eva, would you like to tell them? Eva stepped forward, her hand moving to her stomach in a gesture that immediately drew gasps and excited murmurs from the crowd. We're expecting again. Twins, the healer confirms, due in 4 months. The courtyard erupted in celebration. Sophia shrieked with delight and immediately started listing names. Alexander tried to look mature and composed, but couldn't hide his excited grin. Martin, standing at the edge of the platform with his own mate, a fierce Eastern Territory wolf named Claire, smiled broadly. Congratulations, Your Majesties. Though I fear for my sanity training 4 royal pups in combat instead of 2. You love it and you know it, Claire said, elbowing him affectionately. As the celebration continued into the night, Charles pulled Eva into the traditional couple's dance, moving together with the ease of a decade's practice. 4 children, Eva mused, her head resting on his shoulder. Your mother would be laughing at us right now. She'd be delighted, Charles corrected, and probably placing bets on which one inherits her stubbornness. All of them, if there's any justice in the world. Eva looked up at him, her eyes soft. Are you happy, Charles? Truly? Every single day, he answered honestly. There's not a moment I'm with you that I don't thank the fates for your forgiveness, your strength, your love. You took a broken king and helped him become whole. We healed each other, Eva corrected. That's what true mates do. As they danced under the stars, surrounded by their pack and their growing family, Charles looked over Eva's shoulder and could have sworn he saw his mother's face in the shadows, smiling, approving, at peace, knowing her son had finally found his way home. Thank you, Mother, he thought, for everything, but especially for her. And somewhere in the vast beyond, Queen Felicia Blackthorne watched her son, his mate, and her grandchildren, and knew that her final gift had been her greatest achievement. Love, after all, was the most powerful magic of all. The end, for real this time.